The signal died on a Tuesday. Dario Reeves knew it was Tuesday because he had marked every day on the wall above his bunk since arriving on Varith 9. 16 months of small pencil lines. It was the kind of thing a man did when the days stopped feeling different from each other. He had been sitting at his workbench with a cold cup of something the colony kitchen called coffee. It was not coffee when the radio unit went quiet. Not static quiet. Not interference quiet. Dead quiet. The kind of silence that has weight. He set down the cup and stared at the unit for a moment, the way a person stares at a thing before accepting that something has gone wrong. Then he picked up his diagnostic tool and started checking. The outer housing was fine. The power cell was fine. The signal board was fine. It was the resonance coil, the core component that allowed the unit to reach across deep space and lock onto Earth's broadcast frequency. And it was cracked clean through the center. Not chipped. Not worn. Cracked, like something had stressed it from the inside over a long period of time. And today had been the day it finally gave. Dario sat with that information for a while. The radio was his one reliable connection to Earth. Not messages, nothing personal ever came through on the colony band. Just the pulse. A steady automated signal that the broadcast relay back home sent out across all registered outpost frequencies every 7 days. It carried no real content. Just a tone, a timestamp, and a standard identification code. What it really carried, though it would never say so in any technical manual, was proof that Earth was still there. That the people who built the relay still thought it was worth running. That someone, somewhere, had not forgotten that human beings were scattered across the far dark and needed to know they had not been left behind. He filed a repair request that evening. The colony logistics officer, a large insectoid alien named Bren, who smelled faintly of engine grease and was the friendliest non-human Dario had ever met, reviewed it the next morning and delivered the news without any particular softness. Resonance coil, human standard, deep range variant, Bren said, reading from the inventory screen with 3 of his 6 eyes. Next supply run is in 22 weeks. I can flag it as priority, but priority only means it arrives before the non-priority items on the same ship. 22 weeks, Dario said. Give or take. Dario nodded slowly. Give or take. Bren made a sound that Dario had learned was the insectoid equivalent of a sympathetic wince. You humans are strange about silence, he said. I do not mean that badly. My species finds silence restful. But I have noticed that you're kind. You treat it like something is missing. Something is missing, Dario said. Bren did not have a good answer for that. So he left Dario with his paperwork and the weight of 22 weeks. Dario locked the broken radio in his workshop that night. Not because anyone would take it. There were fewer than 40 beings on this colony, and none of them had any use for a human radio. He locked it because he did not want to look at it. A broken thing left in the open was just a reminder of what it no longer did. He was checking the workshop seals before heading to his bunk when he heard it. Small. Quick. A sound like something light-footed moving behind the storage canisters in the back corner of the supply shed attached to the workshop. He stood still and listened. Nothing. He stepped closer, looked behind the canisters, saw chewed insulation on a low-voltage cable and nothing else. No sign of whatever had done it. He checked for prints in the dust and found small, 3-toed marks that he did not recognize. The colony had no listed pest species. He had read the environmental briefing when he arrived. Varith 9's native fauna were all cataloged, and none of them matched marks that small. He thought about setting a trap. He had a basic catch and release kit in his equipment locker, standard issue for outpost postings. He stood there for a moment holding the idea, then put it away without acting on it. Whatever it was, it had not damaged anything important. Just chewed some insulation on a cable that ran to the secondary lighting panel. He could replace that in 20 minutes. He replaced it, turned off the workshop lights, and went to bed. The room was very quiet. He lay there in the dark and thought about the pulse signal, that simple, automated tone that had played every 7 days for 16 months. He had never really listened to it. He had just let it run in the background while he worked. The kind of thing you only notice when it stops. 22 weeks. He closed his eyes and listened to the silence where Earth used to be. It was the heat lamp that gave the creature away. Dario had set up a small portable unit in the corner of the workshop to keep the adhesive compounds from stiffening in the cold. Varith 9 ran about 8 degrees colder than a comfortable human room. and the mist that rolled in off the lowlands every evening made it feel colder still. He had positioned the lamp near the floor, angled at the storage shelf where he kept his sealants. Practical. Sensible. He came back from the mess hall one evening to find the lamp moved. Not knocked over. Not damaged. Moved. Deliberately rotated about 40 degrees on its base, now aimed at the gap between the bottom shelf and the floor. A gap just wide enough for something small to curl up in the warm air it threw. He crouched down slowly and looked. Two amber eyes looked back at him from the dark. They were very large for the face they were set in. The face itself was small, narrow snout, a fringe of tiny pale spines along the jaw, scales the color of deep ocean water where it goes blue-green and cold. The creature was roughly the size of a house cat. If a house cat had wings folded tight against its sides and a tail that curled around itself in a neat ring. Dario and the creature looked at each other for a long time. He knew what it was. Every person posted to a colony in Vethran territorial space received a xenobiology briefing. The Vethran were an old species. Ancient, some researchers said, and their young were listed in the briefing as pre-sapient, non-aggressive, instinct-driven. The sort of language that meant, small animal, not a concern, do not interfere with their habitats. Looking at those amber eyes, Dario had serious doubts about the pre-sapient part. The creature, the baby Vethran, did not hiss, did not flee. It watched him with the focused, measuring attention of something that was deciding whether he was a threat. He stayed very still and tried to look as unthreatening as a large human crouched in a small workshop could manage. After a while, the creature looked away. It tucked its nose under its tail and closed its eyes. Apparently, he had passed. He left a piece of his dinner ration on the floor near the shelf that night. Protein block, slightly sweet. When he checked in the morning, it was gone. He left another piece the next evening. Gone. After a week of this, the creature had moved from the gap beneath the shelf to a folded thermal blanket he had placed on top of the shelf, placed there without making a show of it. Just left it one morning before he started work. He named it solely. He did not know if it was male, female, or neither. Vethran biology was not covered in detail in the standard briefing, and he did not intend the name to mean anything in particular. It was just a word that fit. The real surprise came on a Thursday. Dario had been rewiring a ventilation control board, a finicky job that required matching 12 color-coded leads to a non-standard terminal block someone had installed in a hurry and never properly documented. He had been at it for 2 hours and had gotten 9 of the 12 correct, confirmed by his diagnostic tool. The last 3 were giving him trouble. He set down the board and went to get more coffee. Again, not really coffee, and when he returned, Soli was crouched on the workbench beside the board. The creature looked at him, then it looked at the board. Then it reached out one small clawed foreleg and, with a precision that made Dario's breath stop, swapped 2 of the remaining leads, pressed a third into the correct terminal with a soft click, and sat back. Dario picked up his diagnostic tool and ran the check. All 12 connections correct. He stood there for a long moment holding the tool, looking at the board, looking at Soli. Soli was looking at the wall, with great intensity, as though the wall was the most interesting thing in the room, and it had definitely not just done anything worth discussing. Dario put down the diagnostic tool very carefully. Right, he said quietly. Soli continued to study the wall. That evening, Dario moved the broken radio from the locked cabinet and set it on the lower shelf, within Soli's easy reach. He did not say anything about it. He did not look at Soli when he did it. He simply put it there, went to his bunk, and lay looking at the ceiling for a long time, thinking about the word pre-sapient and what it actually meant to the person who had written it. He thought it probably meant, we did not look closely enough. Dario found it on a gray morning, 14 days after he had placed the radio on the lower shelf. He had woken early, dressed in the cold dark, and walked into the workshop expecting nothing in particular. What he found instead stopped him in the doorway. Every component of the radio was laid out across his workbench. Not scattered, not pulled apart carelessly the way something breaks when it is dropped or forced. Laid out. Each piece set down with deliberate space between it and the next, arranged in a grid that covered the full length of the bench. The order made no sense to him at first. It was not the order a human technician would use, grouped by function or by the sequence of disassembly. It was something else, something that had its own logic, even if he could not read it yet. Every component was labeled. Small marks scratched into the bench surface beside each piece. Not letters he recognized. Flowing, angular script that looked like nothing in the colony's shared communication system. He pulled up his reference screen and cross-checked it against every known written language in the colony database. Vethran inherited notation, used exclusively by Vethran engineers to record the mental schematics passed from parent to offspring through biological memory transfer. Listed in the database as rare, non-standardized, not in common use. Dario stood at the bench for a long time, reading a map he did not have the key for. Soli was asleep on the thermal blanket, or appeared to be. He was still standing there 2 hours later when Commander Arriva arrived. Arriva was the colony's security chief and the only full-grown Vethran on the station. She was large, larger than Dario, with scales the deep amber of old resin and eyes that held the particular stillness of someone who had learned to make every expression a choice. She came by the outer workshops on a regular schedule, which Dario respected and stayed out of the way of. She stepped through the door, saw the workbench, and went very still. She looked at the components. She looked at the notation. She looked at Soli. Her wings, folded against her back, shifted once, a small movement, tight and controlled. Then she looked at Dario and said, in the flat, translated tone of the colony's shared language system clipped to her collar, "Come outside." He came outside. "That notation," she said, once the door was closed. "Do you know what it is?" "I looked it up," he said. "Inherited engineering script. Parent to offspring." "Yes." She said it like the word cost her something. Vethran young carry the full technical memory of their parents. Everything the parent knew, every repair, every schematic, every method. It is encoded biologically and transferred. The young do not learn it. They are born with it. She paused. "It is not something we discuss with outside species." "Why not?" She looked at him steadily. "Because the last 2 times outside species learned of it, they decided that young Vethran with inherited technical memory were resources. Not children. Resources." Dario said nothing for a moment. The cold morning air sat between them. "I am not going to do that," he said. "You are not going to involve Soli in your repair work," she said. "That is what I am telling you. The young one is not your tool. It is not your pet. It does not have the judgment yet to understand what it is giving away when it uses that memory in front of outsiders." "It fixed a ventilation board," Dario said. "I was not going to report it. It is disassembling a human deep-range communication unit using Vethran engineering notation," she said. "That is not a ventilation board." She told him she would arrange for Soli to be moved to the colony's central habitat block, where the other non-human young were housed. It was a reasonable thing, a responsible thing. She said it without cruelty, and Dario believed that she meant it for Soli's protection. He nodded. He said he understood. He went back inside and worked at his bench for the rest of the day, not touching the radio components, not speaking to Soli, who watched him from the thermal blanket with those large amber eyes. That evening, before he went to bed, he walked through the workshop to the shed door. He checked the lock. He left it open. He did not look back at Soli when he did it. He went to his bunk and lay in the dark and thought about what Arriva had said, about resources and children, about the difference between the two, and about how sometimes the people trying to protect something and the people trying to use it ended up doing the same thing, just for different reasons. He thought about that for a long time. Then he thought about the notation on his workbench, that careful, inherited script, and what it meant that a small creature had spent 2 weeks studying a broken human radio before it touched a single piece of it. He fell asleep to the sound of something small moving quietly in the workshop. 3 weeks passed before Dario found the radio reassembled. He had not watched. That had been the agreement he made with himself, not an agreement with Soli, because they did not share a language and he was not entirely sure Soli would consider itself bound by agreements with humans, but a private rule he kept. He did not hover. He did not check on the workbench before bed. He came in each morning, did his work, left food on the shelf, and did not look at the lower corner unless Soli was sitting there openly. What he had noticed, in an indirect way, was that things went missing from his supply drawers. Small things. A salvaged oscillation chip he had pulled from a decommissioned survey unit 2 months ago and not gotten around to cataloging. A power coupling the size of his thumb. 3 lengths of microfilament wire. None of it was critical stock. He noticed the absences the way you notice a change in a familiar room. Not immediately, but after a moment of looking at the space where the thing used to be. He did not say anything. And then one morning the radio was sitting in the center of the workbench, fully assembled, and Soli was asleep on the thermal blanket looking as though it had never been near the bench in its life. Dario walked to the bench slowly. He examined the unit without touching it. It looked like his radio, same outer housing, same screen, same input ports. But the casing had been refastened at a slightly different angle, and through the ventilation grill on the side, he could see that the interior was not the same. The component arrangement was different. Something at the core of the unit had been rebuilt in a configuration he did not have the training to name. In the center of where the resonance coil had been, there was something new. Not a coil. A lattice structure, small, dense, built from the oscillation chip and the power coupling and what looked like a section of the heat lamp's regulator board, all wound through with a microfilament wire in a pattern that looked almost biological, like the inside of a very complicated shell. He should not turn it on. That was the first thought. The second thought was that he was absolutely going to turn it on. He sat down at the bench. He checked that the power cell was seated. He looked at Soli, who was very asleep, deeply asleep, possibly the most asleep any creature had ever been. He looked back at the unit. He pressed the power switch. The unit came on. The screen lit. The frequency display ran through its startup calibration. All of that was normal. What was not normal was the signal strength indicator, which climbed past the maximum marker on the standard scale and kept climbing until it ran out of display room and simply held at the top with a small blinking indicator that suggested it would go further if it could. He found the Earth broadcast band by memory. He had tuned to it so many times in 16 months that his hands knew the frequency without needing to look. The tone came in. Clean. No static. No interference. As clear as if the relay station were in the next room rather than across light years of empty space. The automated pulse, steady and even, the timestamp ticking through in precise sequence. Dario sat and listened to it. He had not realized, until this moment, how much noise the old unit had always carried underneath the signal. A faint, constant crackle that he had stopped hearing because it was always there. The silence beneath the tone now was absolute. Pure. It made the signal sound different, more present, somehow, more real. He did not move for a long time. Soli, across the room, opened one amber eye, watched him, closed it again. Then, at the edge of the broadcast band, below the pulse frequency, in a range the old unit had never been sensitive enough to reach, something else surfaced. Dario almost missed it. He had been about to reach for the volume control when he heard it. A texture in the signal. Not automated. Not a tone. A voice. Human. Male. Faint and looping, like a recording on a long repeat cycle. He turned the reception dial slowly, carefully, until the words started to separate from the noise. Broadcasting on this frequency for the last 4 years. If any registered outpost is receiving on the extended band, my name is Ward Callum, Relay Post Oros, Deep Range Sector 7. If anyone alive is still receiving on this band, please respond on the same frequency. I will keep this message running. Then static. Then the loop again from the start. Dario sat very still. The voice of a man who did not know if anyone was listening. Broadcasting into the dark for 4 years on the hope that someone, somewhere, had a receiver good enough to hear him. A receiver exactly like the one sitting on the workbench. Dario's hand moved to the transmit switch. Stopped there. Rested on it without pressing. He looked at Soli. Soli looked back at him, both eyes open now, unblinking. The amber gaze of a creature that had spent 3 weeks studying a broken human machine and had then, quietly, without being asked, without any promise of reward, fixed it. Dario pressed the switch. His voice came out rough. He cleared his throat and tried again. Ward Callum, Relay Post Oros. This is Dario Reeves, Colony Outpost Verith 9, Outer Sensor Station. I am receiving your message on the extended band. I am transmitting on the same frequency. If you receive this, please respond. He let go of the switch. The unit hummed. The loop continued playing from Ward Callum somewhere in the dark. The same 4-year-old recording, patient and steady. Dario did not know the signal lag. He did not know how far Relay Post Oros was. He told himself that no response for a day or 2 meant nothing and tried to believe it. By that evening, word had spread through the colony. He did not know how. He had not told anyone. But Bren appeared at the workshop door 2 hours after the transmission, large and curious, smelling of engine grease as always, ducking his upper set of arms to fit through the frame. He looked at the radio. He looked at Soli. He looked at Dario with 3 of his eyes simultaneously, which was either an expression of great interest or mild alarm. Dario had never fully worked out which. "There is a story going around," Bren said, "that you fixed your radio." "It was fixed for me," Dario said. Bren looked at Soli again. The small Veth ran. "Apparently." Bren made the sympathetic wince sound. "Oriva is going to come here." "I know." She came the next morning. Dario had expected the confrontation from the night before last to resume, sharpened by the fact that he had not moved Soli and had clearly been actively using the radio. He had a response ready, quiet, factual, not argumentative. Oriva stepped in, looked at the unit, and did not speak for a long time. She crossed to the workbench and crouched down to examine the interior through the grill. Her head tilted slightly. One claw rose toward the lattice structure at the core and stopped just short of touching it. "This is the Verith method," she said quietly. "Old resonance engineering. My people stopped using it 200 years ago because the required materials became hard to source." She paused. Soli's parent, the engineer, was one of 3 Vethrans still practicing it. Dario said, carefully, "You knew Soli's parents." Oriva was quiet for a moment. "The survey accident was 18 months ago. I have been watching Soli since then. The young one comes and goes in the outer colony zone, and I have not intervened because—" She stopped, straightened up. "Soli carries complete inherited memory from 2 engineers. The kind of technical knowledge that took generations to develop. I did not know what to do with that. I did not know if acting would protect the young one or draw the wrong attention." "The same thing you were worried I would do," Dario said. She looked at him. Yes. It was the closest thing to an apology Dario had ever seen from Oriva, and he did not press it. That afternoon, Bren organized something that no one officially called a gathering because no one had officially organized it. And yet somehow 16 beings from 6 different species found themselves standing or crouching, or in one case hovering, just outside Dario's workshop door at the same time. He left the door open. He turned the radio's external speaker up. The Earth pulse came through into the misty Verith 9 evening, clean and even. The automated tone, the timestamp, the identification code. The response from the assembled colony was strange and various. One of the Vethran survey workers said it was geometrically uninteresting. A floating membrane creature from the upper atmosphere tilted itself in a way that might have been curiosity. Bren listened for a full minute with great seriousness, and then said it sounded like the colony water recycler when the pressure was properly set, which he meant as a positive observation. Soli sat in the workshop doorway, visible to everyone, watching alien faces react to a human signal. Its tail moved slowly. Its amber eyes moved from face to face. It looked, Dario thought, extremely pleased with itself. The hours passed. Nothing came back on the transmit frequency. Dario told himself again that the lag meant nothing. He made the not coffee. He sat. He waited. It was nearly the end of the second day, and the crowd had long since gone home, and Bren had stopped by twice to check, and then left quietly, and Soli had moved back to the thermal blanket, and Dario was beginning to make peace with the idea that the transmission had traveled too far, or in the wrong direction, or had not found its target, when the carrier signal on the extended band shifted. The loop stopped. The frequency held a live carrier tone. Not recorded. Real time. A voice came through the static. Tired. Startled. Human. Verith 9. Verith 9 outpost. This is Ward Callum at Relay Post Oros. I am receiving your signal. I am. A pause, as if the speaker had needed to sit down. I am receiving you clearly. Please confirm. Please confirm this is a live transmission. Dario had his hand on the switch before the sentence finished. Ward Callum, this is Dario Reeves. This is a live transmission. I confirm. The signal lag was long, close to 40 seconds each way, which meant every exchange took a minute and a half from question to answer. They had to speak in slow, complete thoughts. No back and forth the way people talked in the same room. Just statements sent into the dark, and then waiting, and then the dark answering. Ward Callum had been at relay post Oros for 6 years. He had started the looping broadcast in his second year when he began receiving fragmented carrier signals from the deep outer band, signals too faint to resolve with standard equipment, signals that his instruments flagged as possibly human origin but could never confirm. He had been broadcasting blind ever since. He said he had nearly shut the recording down 3 months ago. Budget reviews, justification paperwork, the usual reasons things get turned off. He had not shut it down. Oriva stood in the back of the workshop and listened to the exchange without speaking. Dario translated in fragments during the lag pauses. Not everything, just enough. He told her that Ward was a researcher. That relay post Oros was a deep space listening station maintained by Earth's Outpost Monitoring Program. That the station's job was to stay in contact with isolated human postings too far from the main colony network to receive standard transmissions. When the lag allowed, Ward asked about Dario's signal strength. Dario read him the indicator numbers. There was a long pause from the Oros end, longer than the lag explained. Verith 9 is not in our active registry, Ward said when the response came. You were listed as signal dormant 18 months ago. We flag signal dormant outposts for low priority monitoring, but we do not route supply traffic to them. With a signal at this strength, I can file a reclassification. Active human outpost. That changes your supply routing priority significantly. Dario lowered the transmit switch and did not say anything for a moment. He turned to Oriva. He told her what Ward had said, that the signal strength of the rebuilt radio was high enough to reclassify Verith 9 as an active posting. That active postings received scheduled supply routes rather than the long-wait general colony cargo system. That it would affect not just him but the entire colony, faster access, better equipment allocations, medical supply priority. The workshop was quiet. Oriva looked at Soli. Soli was asleep on the thermal blanket, curled tight, tail wrapped, wings folded, completely unbothered by the fact that it had just changed the material conditions of life for 40 beings on a cold, misty planet. Bren, who had appeared at the door sometime during the transmission and was leaning against the frame in the way he leaned against things when he did not want to interrupt, but absolutely did not want to miss anything, made a sound that was not quite a laugh and not quite the sympathetic wince, but something between the two. The small Veth ran, he said. The small Veth ran, Dario agreed. Oriva crossed the room. She stood over Soli for a moment, looking down at the sleeping creature with an expression Dario could not fully read through the difference in their faces. Then she straightened and looked at Dario. I am going to file a designation with the colony registry, she said. Junior technical contributor to colony infrastructure. It is a real designation. It exists in the formal system. It has not been used in this colony before, but it exists. It grants the holder protected status. Official role. Cannot be transferred, relocated, or reassigned without a formal review process that would take longer than anyone would bother. Dario looked at her. That would protect Soli from being moved. From being moved, from being reassigned, from being identified as a resource rather than a member of the colony. She said it evenly, without apology or explanation. She had made a decision, and she was saying it out loud. I should have done it sooner. She left to file the paperwork. Bryn lingered for a while, and then also left, on the grounds that he had cargo manifests to update and also that he wanted to be the one to tell the rest of the colony about the supply route reclassification, which Dario understood. The workshop emptied. The radio hummed on the bench, holding the live connection to relay post Oros, warm and real. Ward Callum's last transmission of the evening was short. He said he would log the reclassification that night. He said he was glad someone had answered. He said it in the careful, controlled tone of someone who had been hoping for something for a long time and was not yet ready to show how much. Dario sent back that he was glad someone had been broadcasting. He sat at the bench for a long time after the channel quieted into its low standby hum. He did not turn the radio off. He had not turned it off once since Soli had put it back together, and he was not going to start now. It could run. It could stay warm and active and connected, a live signal going both directions across the dark. He looked at the corner where Soli was sleeping. The creature had not asked anything of him, had not asked to stay, had not asked for the heat lamp, had not made any kind of arrangement. It had simply found a warm place in a cold workshop and stayed there, and, in the quiet way of a creature that had inherited a dead engineer's memory and had no one left to pass it to, had fixed the one broken thing sitting within reach. Dario rested his arms on the bench. The pulse tone ran steady and clean in the background. Somewhere across a very large distance, a man named Ward Callum was probably not sleeping either. Dario looked at Soli one more time. "Thank you," he said quietly. Soli slept on, deeply and peacefully, as though it had never done anything worth thanking.